Have you ever been hangry? I mean, so hungry that it's affecting your emotions. We are going to look at a 2,000-year-old story where Jesus is hangry. And we're going to try to figure out what is it that was going on there, what was happening with Jesus, what was going on with Peter, his disciple, who seems to have had some kind of an aha experience from that, and how does this ancient story relate to our lives in this post-pandemic, maybe not post-pandemic, post-Afghanistan, who knows what the future is going to hold kind of world that we're living in today. So this story begins right after Jesus is at a high note in his ministry. I mean, we continue to celebrate a particular day in Jesus' life called Palm Sunday, where Jesus is coming into Jerusalem with his disciples and everybody's loving him. I mean, it is off the charts popularity. But then what happens right after that story is a little underwhelming. Jesus walks into the temple and then leaves. And all that Mark tells us is that it was late, so Jesus left. So apparently there's something that Jesus wanted to do in the temple that because of the time of day, Jesus couldn't do. So as we keep following, wondering, so what was Jesus going to do in the temple that he couldn't do, and when's he going to do it? We have this little story that's kind of strange, where Jesus is hungry. It's the next day, they're walking back toward the temple. Jesus is hungry, and Jesus looks to a fig tree to get some figs, finds that there's only leaves on the fig tree, no fruit, and curses the fig tree. And then Mark adds, in a very confusing sort of way, a little phrase, because it wasn't the season for figs. And you're like, okay, so the fig tree didn't have any fruit because it wasn't the season for figs. Nevertheless, Jesus was hungry. The fig tree didn't give him fruit. And so he's ticked off and he curses the fig tree. Now, to me, that's the definition of hangry. So it's all a very strange story thus far. And right after Jesus cursing that fig tree, we jump into the temple once again. Jesus is back in the temple. And guess what he does in the temple? Well, now that there's all sorts of people there, he starts shoving people, turning over tables, shutting things down, keeping people from doing what you're supposed to do in the temple. And then he channels one of the prophets. He starts speaking words from the prophets of the Old Testament. And then he leaves again. And all we find out is that whatever it is that he did there was so offensive that the leaders of the religious organization of the day began to seriously plot how they can not just take Jesus down a notch or two, but how they can actually kill Jesus. And so then we keep reading, hoping this story is going to take us somewhere and make some sense of something, and we're back to the fig tree again, that fig tree before this event in the temple. And Peter looks at the fig tree and sees that the fig tree is in fact withered. It is exactly what Jesus cursed it to be. It is totally withered. It's no longer alive. And then it says this, Peter remembered. All it says, Peter remembered that Peter looked at that fig tree, saw it just wilted, and then he remembered. He had this aha experience. And then the story goes on from there with some words of Jesus that don't quite make sense if we're not tracking with everything. And we're just kind of left wondering, like, what's up with the hangry Jesus? Now, here's what I want you to do. We're going to take the next few weeks to go deeper into this passage. You're just going to have to trust me on the idea that this passage is really relevant to us today and that we need the aha experience that Peter had. And so we're going to dig in this passage and start unpacking it and trying to figure out what's going on with this thing. So what you need to do is find your Bible or go to Bible Gateway, and you can even listen to the passage in Bible Gateway. They have an audio version. But find Mark chapter 11 and start listening to this chapter and ask yourself, what's going on? What makes sense? What doesn't make sense at all? What questions do I have as you go through this? And if you want to, feel free to share those with me at randy@randylovejoy.com. I'd love to hear your reflections on the passage. And then keep checking in with our content because we're, again, going to go deeper and deeper in what's going on in this passage and how this ancient passage is relevant to us today. So I hope you have an awesome week this week. Continue to take it just day by day. I think that's all any of us can do in this crazy time in which we live. And keep making good happen in your lives, your relationships, and your community. We'll talk to you again soon.